The Hall of Ascendancy was carved to intimidate. Its towering crystal arches refracted pale violet light across the floor, illuminating the steps that rose toward the obsidian throne. 14 steps, one for each civilization subjugated by Empress Vaelira Tharyn during her unforgiving rise to power. She sat upon that throne now, her posture sharpened by decades of rule, her expression carved from iron. Before her, luminous tactical projections floated like ghosts, displaying the aftermath of the Skellen Rift engagement. 5 human strike craft eliminated, 1 captured, 0 Dravari casualties, a textbook victory. And yet Vaelira felt nothing. Her strategists argued below her, their voices echoing through the chamber. The prisoners should be processed immediately, Lord Veith insisted, his segmented crest flaring in agitation. Interrogation, extraction, then public nullification. Resistance must be punished. Not all prisoners lack value, countered Commander Rylan, calm as ever. One of the captured craft's command crew displayed unusual combat precision. Possible intelligence relevance. Vaelira barely listened. Victory felt hollow lately, another system crushed, another day where her empire bowed but her spirit remained unmoved. Even triumph had become a flavorless ritual. Then Veith said something that cut through her boredom like a blade. And the pilot, the human who killed 21 of our warriors during the boarding action, his execution should be immediate. Vaelira's eyes narrowed. 21. She repeated, 1 human. With combat exosuit assistance, Rylan clarified, but the result remains statistically aberrant. For the first time in weeks, Vaelira felt a spark, thin, cold, but real. Bring him to me. Her advisors froze. Empress, Veith protested. He is of negligible rank, a mid-tier pilot with no strategic. He killed 21 Dravari elites. I will see the face that accomplished that. Bring him. No one argued after that. Exactly 17 minutes later, the chamber doors hissed open. 2 guards pushed the human forward, forcing him to kneel at the base of the throne's ascent. He still wore his exosuit, dented, scorched, streaked with carbon from explosions. His helmet remained sealed. His hands were bound, but his posture was wrong. Not broken, not submissive, controlled. Choosing silence, choosing compliance, not being forced into it. Vaelira leaned forward slightly. Remove your helmet. The human did not move. The guards raised their shock lances. Veith stepped forward, lips curling. You were commanded by the Empress herself. But the human slowly lifted his restrained hands and disengaged the clamps. Pressure hissed outward. He lifted the helmet free. Vaelira expected rage, fear, defiance. She did not expect that look. He was young by human standards, late 20s maybe, dark hair plastered to his forehead, a split brow. A bruise spreading along his jaw. His eyes, however, were startling, an icy gray streaked with pale gold, reflecting the chamber's light like fractured metal. But none of that mattered. It was his expression. He looked at her with something she had never seen directed at her in her entire reign. Not hatred, not fear, not calculation, pity, and beneath it, worse, disappointment. The hall seemed to tighten around her, the air too thin. No one in all 14 conquered systems had ever looked at the Dravari Empress that way. What is your designation? She asked, voice colder than she intended. Lieutenant Aric Rowan, he answered, steady and clear. Human Defense Fleet, 7th Wing. Serial 4521 Kappa. I did not ask for your sequence code. She stood slowly. I asked why you killed 21 of my warriors. His answer came without hesitation. The same reason anyone fights, Aric said. Because what we stand for matters more than the pain it costs. Vaelira's jaw tightened. You resisted despite impossible odds. You were surrounded. You should have surrendered. Surrendering would mean becoming something I couldn't live with, he replied quietly. And what are you fighting for, human? Your resistance is futile. My empire spans systems your species barely understands. He exhaled softly, almost sympathetically. I'm not fighting your empire, he said. I'm fighting the belief that conquest is the only way to exist in the universe. I'm fighting the idea that strength and loneliness are the same thing. The words struck like a pulse blade. Her advisors stiffened, waiting for her to execute him on the spot for insolence. But Vaelira remained silent, because the human was still staring at her, with that unbearable, dissecting pity, as if he saw through the crown, through the throne, through the empire, straight into the hollow space she kept buried beneath armor and ceremony. Take him to isolated holding, she ordered abruptly. Veith snapped around in outrage. Majesty, he is far too. Take him, she repeated. He is not to be executed, not yet. The guards dragged Aric. The isolation ward of the Dravari flagship was designed to strip prisoners of identity. Sterile white walls, a single cot, no reflective surfaces, no sound except the low hum of ventilation systems. And yet, when Empress Vaelira accessed the surveillance feed later that night, the cell looked different. Because the human inside it refused to behave the way prisoners always did. Lieutenant Aric Rowan sat on the floor, back straight, eyes open, breathing steady. Not panicked, not defeated, not bargaining, simply existing as if captivity were an inconvenience rather than a looming endpoint. Vaelira rewound the footage twice. He never flinched when the door sealed, never raged, never collapsed in exhaustion. Most prisoners cycled through denial, anger, despair. Aric moved through none of it. He simply removed the cracked plating from his gauntlets and examined his injuries with quiet, methodical care, using nothing but the gray cloth of his undersuit to stop the bleeding. It was wrong. Humans were supposed to be fragile. They broke quickly and loudly, yet this one seemed to fold pain into himself like it was familiar territory. Vaelira found herself leaning closer to the screen. Why is he so calm? She had interrogated commanders, warlords, assassins. She knew the look of a person preparing to bargain for their life. And she knew the look of someone preparing to die. Aric had neither. He looked like someone waiting. But for what? The next morning, Vaelira walked into the Hall of Ascendancy with her expression carved in stone. Her advisors were already gathered. Majesty, Veith began immediately, the human must be executed today. His survival is causing speculation among the crew. They see your hesitation. My hesitation, Vaelira cut in sharply, is strategic. Veith blinked, startled. Strategic how? She let the silence stretch long enough to make him sweat, then said, I intend to interrogate him personally. A collective intake of breath filled the chamber. That is highly irregular, Rylan warned. Protocols exist for a reason. You should not be alone with a combatant who killed 21 elites. Are you suggesting I cannot defend myself? Vaelira asked softly. Rylan stepped back immediately. Never that, Empress. Then there is no problem, she said. Prepare the isolation wing. I want all monitoring systems active. No interruptions unless I call. Her advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared continue the protest. Because beneath her cold authority, Vaelira felt something she hadn't felt since her ascension. Curiosity, sharp, dangerous, alive. The corridor to the isolation ward was quiet except for the rhythmic pulse of containment generators. Two guards saluted stiffly as Vaelira approached. Open the cell, she commanded. Majesty, protocol dictates. Open it. The door slid aside. Aric looked up instantly, rising to his feet without being told. Not in defiance, more like respect. It unsettled her more than insolence would have. You may sit, she said. I'd rather stand. It wasn't a request. He sat, the power dynamic reasserted itself, but only barely. His eyes, those unnerving gray and gold eyes, never left hers. Vaelira began with the obvious. You killed 21 Dravari warriors. Do you regret it? Yes. The answer was immediate. No hesitation. She blinked. You regret killing them. I regret the necessity, Aric said quietly. But I don't pretend it wasn't my choice. I made it. I live with it. Her jaw tightened. Warriors were bred to feel pride in battlefield kills. Regret was alien to Dravari culture. You don't apologize, she observed. Apology doesn't change what happened. And yet you speak of regret. I regret the world that created the need for it, Aric said, not the action itself. Vaelira paused. That was an answer she had not expected. You humans cling to moral contradictions, she said. Regret without remorse, violence without hatred. Survival is complicated, Aric replied. You should know that. The words slipped past his lips gently, too gently. Not an accusation, not an insult, just truth, and somehow that made it worse. Vaelira stepped closer. Why did you look at me that way in the throne room? She asked, with pity. Aric inhaled slowly, as if choosing his words with care. Because I've seen leaders like you before. Conquerors, people who confuse isolation with strength. The words sliced deeper than any blade. You presume much. I observe, he corrected. When you rule through fear, you build walls, and walls don't just keep enemies out, they keep everyone out. Her pulse kicked harder. You know nothing of my rule. I know loneliness when I see it. Vaelira stiffened instinctively, but the damage was already done. His words hit a place she kept buried so deep even she rarely acknowledged it. She needed to regain control. You are the prisoner, she said coldly. I am the Empress. You will not. You came alone, Aric said softly. No guards in the room, no weapons drawn. You didn't come for dominance, you came for answers. Vaelira felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, shame, something else she refused to name. I came, she said sharply, because I want to understand what drives a human to such reckless resistance. Aric studied her for a long moment. The same thing that drives you, he said, a belief that something must be protected. Even if it hurts, even if it leaves you alone. Her breath 3 days passed before Vaelira admitted to herself what her advisors had already begun whispering about. She was thinking about the human far too often, not thinking in the strategic sense, not in the threat assessment sense, not in the manner expected of an empress monitoring a dangerous captive, but thinking in ways that unsettled her, in ways that had nothing to do with empire or security. Every night after reviewing fleet logistics and expansion demands, Vaelira found her steps drifting, unwilling but inevitable, toward the surveillance chamber. The room was dark, lit only by the cold blue glow of the screens. And on one of those screens, always the same one, Lieutenant Aric Rowan moved through his quiet routines. He should have been deteriorating. Prisoners always did. But Aric's mind refused to decay the way others did. He exercised with slow precision, adapting movements to avoid reopening his wounds. He cleaned the cell even though no one expected him to. He hummed under his breath sometimes, a fragmented melody that the translation systems categorized as untranslatable human tonal expression. Vaelira suspected it was a song. Sometimes he drew shapes on the wall using nothing but vapor from chilled air, spirals, stars, geometric patterns that evaporated seconds later. Most nights he simply sat on the floor, eyes unfocused, expression distant. Not numb, not broken, just tired, a kind of weariness Vaelira recognized with a clarity she hated. By the 4th day, even Veeth noticed her distraction. "Majesty," he said during a briefing, "your attention seems misaligned." Vaelira's eyes snapped up. "Are you questioning my focus?" "Never," Veeth said quickly, "only observing that your decisions have been gentler. There were 3 planetary governors you did not punish for inefficiency. That is unlike you." Rylan glanced at her, concern flickering in his expression. The thought made heat crawl up her spine, anger, embarrassment, something sharper. She stood abruptly. Briefing adjourned. She didn't wait for formal dismissal protocol. She walked out, armor flowing behind her, posture rigid. But the truth gnawed beneath her skin. She was changing, and she knew exactly why. That evening she went to the isolation wing. Alone, the guards straightened in alarm. "Majesty, protocol forbids." "Protocol bends to my command. Stay outside. If I do not exit within 30 minutes, eliminate the prisoner." They obeyed, though unease radiated from them. Vaelira entered the cell. Aric stood immediately, a habit of respect he never seemed to question. His injuries had begun to knit beneath the medical gel, though bruises still darkened his jaw. "You came back," he said quietly. She hated the way something in her chest reacted to the simplicity of those words. "This is not a social visit," she said sharply. "I figured not," Aric replied. "You don't strike me as someone who visits prisoners for conversation." "Correct." She gestured for him to sit. He did so without argument this time, though his eyes followed her with that same steady, unguarded calm. Vaelira began clinically. "You killed 21 of my warriors. Most prisoners justify such actions. You haven't." "I don't believe in justifying death," he said, "only acknowledging it." "And what exactly does that mean?" "That I remember every face." Her expression tightened despite herself. "Regret is weakness," she said. "Regret is proof you're still human," Aric countered softly. "Or whatever your equivalent is." Vaelira's jaw clenched. "I am Dravari, we are built for strength." "You're built for silence," he said. "There's a difference." She felt that truth like a blade. "You presume much about my people." "I don't presume about your people," he said gently. "Only about you." Her pulse fluttered, an infuriating, uncontrolled reaction. "Then tell me," Vaelira said sharply, "what do you think you see?" Aric didn't answer immediately. He searched her face, not with fear, not with insolence, but with a frightening accuracy she didn't know how to deflect. "I see someone who's been alone for a very long time," he said softly. "So long that she's forgotten what it feels like not to be." Vaelira's breath hitched before she could stop it. "That is not your concern." "No," he agreed. "But you came here anyway." She looked away, her hands tightening behind her back. No one, no advisor, no ally, no enemy had ever spoken to her like this. Not with defiance, not with adoration, with understanding. It was unbearable. "You are a prisoner," she said. "Your insight is irrelevant." "Maybe," Aric said, "but it doesn't make it wrong." Silence stretched, heavy, electric. Finally, Vaelira forced her voice to steady. "You speak as if you know pain." "I do." "You speak as if you know responsibility." "I do." She frowned. "And what have you carried that compares to an empire?" "Loss," he said. "Loss can be heavier than any crown." The words hit her so hard, she almost forgot to breathe. She remembered, for one brief instant, her father's cold lessons. The day she inherited the throne. The nights spent in her chambers, armor still on, because removing it felt too vulnerable. She had never told anyone those memories. And here was a human, a prisoner, speaking truths she had not allowed herself to think for years. "You should hate me," she said quietly. "My empire destroyed your colonies, your fleet, your people." "I do hate what your empire does," Aric said, "but that's not the same as hating you." Vaelira stared at him. No one had ever separated her from her empire before, not even in her own mind. The breach alarms thundered through the ship, a pulse of crimson lighting the corridors as Dravari warriors sprinted toward defensive stations. Vaelira's command deck shifted instantly into organized chaos. Tactical screens flared to life, showing small human strike signatures moving through the lower maintenance corridors. "Resistance infiltrators," Rylan reported sharply. 5 confirmed, possibly more. They slipped through a supply convoy's blind zone. Their objective is unknown. Veeth hissed, "Unknown? They are humans. Their only objective is sabotage and assassination. We must initiate purge protocol." Vaelira's gaze locked on one flashing indicator, a blinking mark that pulsed near the isolation ward, near Aric. Her chest tightened with an emotion she refused to name. "Where are the infiltrators heading?" she demanded. Rylan hesitated. "Their path aligns with the secure holding sectors." The air in the command deck changed, tense, electric. "They're going for the human prisoner," Veeth spat, "to free him." Or kill him, Vaelira thought silently. She kept her voice level. "Send 4 squads to the lower decks, lock down all junctions." "Majesty," Rylan said quietly, "if the infiltrators reach the isolation wing before our squads, they may." "Then we move," Vaelira said. Now, the corridors roared with alarms as Vaelira strode through them, Rylan and 6 elite guards flanking her. She forced her pace faster, her armor flowing behind her like a living shadow. Every turn felt too slow. Every step felt like a countdown. She should not be feeling this. Aric was a prisoner, a human, an enemy. Yet the thought of him being executed by accident, or worse, freed and gone forever, pressed against her ribs like a blade. They rounded the final bend toward the isolation wing. Smoke filled the corridor. Bodies lay on the floor, human infiltrators and Dravari guards alike. The isolation cell door had been blown inward, metal edges warped from a shaped charge. Vaelira felt something cold and sharp coil around her spine. "Aric," she whispered before she could stop herself. "Majesty," Rylan said cautiously, "stay behind us. There may still be movement." A shadow emerged from the smoke. The guards raised weapons. Vaelira stepped forward before they could fire. Aric Rowan stumbled into view, blood streaking down the side of his face, his hands no longer bound, his breathing uneven. And supporting him, her arm across his shoulders, was a wounded Dravari guard he was helping to carry. He was protecting one of hers. The moment froze the entire corridor. Aric lowered the guard gently to the floor before turning to Vaelira. His hair was matted, his suit torn, but his eyes, those maddening, steady eyes, were clear. "She needs medical attention," he said, nodding toward the guard. "She took shrapnel when they breached the door." Rylan stared in disbelief. "You helped defend our guards." Aric shrugged weakly. "They weren't trying to kill anyone who wasn't attacking. The infiltrators were. I made a choice." Veeth strode forward, fury trembling in every motion. "Step away from the Empress. You betrayed your own people." Aric exhaled slowly. "They came to free me. I told them no." Vaelira blinked, stunned. "You refused liberation." Aric met her gaze with quiet sincerity. "Killing you would only replace you with someone worse, and leaving this ship now would change nothing. But helping you," his breath hitched, "helping you might." Something shifted inside Vaelira so abruptly it almost hurt. "Why?" she demanded. "Why protect my people?" Aric smiled faintly, even through exhaustion. "Because someone on this ship is starting to question what power is supposed to mean. And I'd like to see where that goes. Her chest tightened sharply. He's dying, she realized. He's bleeding far more than he's showing. Medical team, Vaelira snapped. Now. Two medics sprinted forward. Aric swayed, then collapsed. Vaelira caught him before he hit the floor. Her arms moved instinctively, armor shifting to cushion him. His weight settled against her chest, warm, heavy, terrifyingly human. His eyes fluttered. "Took you long enough," he murmured, barely conscious. Then darkness claimed him. Later in the medical quarters, Aric lay on a diagnostic bed, surrounded by glowing instruments. Dravari physicians moved around him with careful precision, sealing wounds, regenerating tissue, stabilizing vitals. Vaelira watched without moving, without breathing, without allowing herself to feel. When they were done and the room emptied, she approached his bedside as if drawn by gravity she couldn't resist. "Why would you risk your life for mine?" she whispered softly. Aric's eyes opened slowly, clouded with pain but unmistakably focused on her. "You're not the monster you pretend to be," he said. "And you don't want to be alone anymore. That's worth fighting for." Something cracked in Vaelira's composure. "You could have escaped," she said, voice barely steady. "You could have gone home." "No," Aric said gently. "Not without finishing what I started." "And what did you start?" she asked, almost afraid to hear it. Aric held her gaze. "Showing you that strength doesn't have to mean isolation." Her breath caught. He continued, voice soft and earnest. "And if you want to build something different, something better, then I'll stay. Not as a prisoner, as someone who believes you can." She didn't. Aric regained consciousness 2 days later, slowly, painfully, as if climbing out of a deep ocean. When his vision cleared, the first thing he saw was the nebula outside the viewport, a vast swirl of crimson and gold. The second thing he saw was Empress Vaelira Tharyn sitting beside his bed. She wasn't armored, she wasn't guarded, she wasn't performing. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked human. "Awake," she said softly. "Good." Aric struggled to sit up, but she placed a hand on his shoulder to stop him. The gesture was uncharacteristically gentle. He blinked up at her, unsettled by the warmth in her expression. "I should," he started. "You should rest," she interrupted. "You nearly died." "Would have been a heroic exit," he murmured. She shot him a sharp look. "Don't joke about that." He blinked. "Is that concern?" "I nearly lost you after you risked yourself to protect my people," Vaelira said. "I don't appreciate the implication that your life is expendable." Aric stared at her, surprised, moved, and unsettled all at once. He had not expected the Empress of the Dravari to care whether he lived or died. But before he could speak, the doors slammed open. Her advisors entered. Veeth at the front, crest rigid, eyes blazing. "Majesty," he said, ignoring Aric entirely, "we must speak, now." Vaelira straightened, mask returning, but not enough to erase the hint of vulnerability she'd shown. "This is not an appropriate time." "It is the only time," Veeth said sharply. "Your behavior regarding the human has become a matter of state." Aric braced himself. Vaelira's eyes narrowed. "Choose your next words carefully." Veeth plunged ahead anyway. "You have given him medical care, private quarters, individualized attention, unprecedented privileges for a prisoner. This is destabilizing the fleet. Warriors whisper that you are compromised." Aric saw Vaelira's jaw tighten. "I am not compromised," she said coldly. "Then why is he alive? Why is he by your side instead of executed?" Veeth demanded. "He brings nothing but danger. He influences you. He weakens you." Aric tensed. Vaelira didn't turn, but he felt her anger like heat in the room. "You fear him," she said quietly. Veeth flinched. "I fear what he represents, doubt, hesitation, and change." There it was, the real threat. Not Aric, but what Aric awakened in her. Vaelira stepped past Aric's bed, her voice composed but lethal. "Lieutenant Rowan has shown honor your warriors failed to show. He defended Dravari lives at the cost of his freedom. That earns respect." "Respect," Veeth snapped. "He is manipulating you." Aric opened his mouth to speak, but Vaelira didn't give him the chance. "This discussion is over. You are dismissed." "No," Veeth said, trembling with fury. "Not until the human is removed from your presence permanently." Rylan stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "Veeth, enough." But Veeth pointed at Aric. "He dies, or the council will challenge your rulership." The room froze. Aric's pulse spiked. Vaelira went still too still. "You would threaten your empress," she said softly, "because a human showed me a different path." Veeth didn't back down. "Because that human is turning you from who you must be." A dangerous silence filled the chamber. Then Vaelira spoke slow and precise. "Aric Rowan will not be executed." Then you leave us know. And if the council challenges me, she continued calmly, I will remind them that I ascended this throne by defeating 3 claimants in the right of dominion. Do any of you wish to test whether I have grown weaker? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. Vaelira Tharyn had never lost a battle in her life. Even compromised, even wounded, she was still the deadliest being in the room. Slowly, her advisors backed away, but Veeth, dangerous, furious Veeth, spoke one last time. You are choosing him. I am choosing the future of my empire, Vaelira said sharply. Veeth's crest folded back in disgust. Then your empire will fracture. He turned and stormed out. The others followed. When the doors closed, silence settled again. Vaelira turned back to Aric, tension draining out of her like a tide pulling back from shore. I'm sorry you had to see that, she said. He shook his head. I've seen political collapse before. That wasn't collapse, that was fear. I rule an empire built on strength, she murmured. But now they believe I am changing. Aric met her gaze. Are you? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, closer than before. When you protected my guard, she said softly, you showed me something I wasn't raised to believe in. And what's that? That compassion can coexist with strength, she said. That power doesn't require isolation. That connection, she hesitated, voice lowering. Connection is not weakness. Aric's breath caught. She exhaled shakily, a confession slipping through her walls. You asked me what I am becoming, she said. I don't know the answer, but I know I don't want to go back to what I was. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then rested his palm gently over hers. She didn't pull away. Then don't, he said. You get to choose. 5 years later, the Hall of Ascendancy looked nothing like it once had. Where once the walls had glowed with harsh violet light meant to intimidate, they now radiated a softer tone, still regal, still powerful, but warmer. The steps leading up to the throne had been polished, the banners renewed. Dravari warriors still stood guard, but the air felt different, less suffocating, less cold. And at the center of it all, Empress Vaelira Tharyn sat upon her throne, still every bit the sovereign she had always been, yet undeniably changed. Her posture was strong, her gaze clear, her presence commanding. But the loneliness that once haunted her eyes was gone. Standing beside her, not kneeling, not chained, not lowered, stood Lieutenant Aric Rowan. Dressed in formal neutral attire, no longer a prisoner nor a guest, but something far harder to define. Political advisor, bridge between species, the man who had taught an empire how to question itself. And today he stood beside her for the most important moment of their shared history. A diplomatic envoy from the human resistance filed into the hall, their armor cleaned, their posture tense but hopeful. They had come for the final signatures. 5 years of negotiations, setbacks, cultural clashes, and near disasters had led them here. Vaelira rose. This session will bring an end to our conflict, she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. Not through conquest. Not through surrender, through understanding. The human envoy looked up, stunned. It had been decades since any Dravari leader spoke such words without coercion. One of them, a commander with silver hair, stepped forward. Empress Vaelira, he said cautiously, we never expected peace. Neither did I, she replied, but expectations change. She glanced at Aric. He gave her a small nod, steady and grounding. Their partnership was quiet, unspoken, but woven into every decision she had made for half a decade. Let us proceed, she said. Documents were displayed via holographic projection. Terms were confirmed. Worlds restored. Boundaries respected. Shared governance committees established. Each clause was a piece of history rewritten. When the final signature flashed across the screen, the hall remained silent for a long, heavy moment. Then the human envoy bowed, not out of fear but gratitude. Vaelira inclined her head in return. The war was over. Later that evening, after the dignitaries had departed and the ship's lighting dimmed into night cycle, Vaelira found Aric exactly where she expected. The observation deck. It was their place. The place where he had first stood beside her without fear. The place where she had first allowed someone to be close without armor. The place where she learned how to breathe like a person, not just a crown. He was looking out at the nebula, gold light threading through layers of crimson mist. You didn't attend the banquet, she said softly. You know I've never been a banquet person, he replied. Too many eyes. You face thousands without blinking. That's different. Those eyes want to judge me. Banquet eyes want small talk. She laughed, quiet, genuine. You're impossible. He glanced at her. You like that? I tolerate it, she corrected, but her smile betrayed her. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Then Vaelira said something she had been turning over in her mind for weeks. When the negotiations began, the council questioned your presence beside me. I'm aware. They said a human had no place in the Hall of Ascendancy. You ignored them. I disregarded them, she admitted, because I knew they were wrong, because I knew you belonged there with me. His chest tightened, but he kept his expression calm. Vaelira. She stepped closer. When I met you, she said, I thought strength required solitude. I thought power demanded isolation. You showed me another way. Aric looked at her, eyes soft. You chose that other way. I just reminded you it existed. She shook her head. You did more than that. You changed how I see myself, how I see my empire, how I see the future. The nebula's light reflected across her features, strong, regal, but softer than he had ever seen. So, she continued quietly, tell me something. Anything. She hesitated, a rare, fragile moment. Do you ever regret staying? Aric didn't look away. No, he said simply. I regret many things in my life, but not staying. Staying gave me purpose again. Staying gave me, he paused, searching for the right word. Something worth building. Vaelira exhaled, a breath she had been holding for 5 years. I'm glad, she whispered. They stood together, close enough that their shoulders brushed lightly. Not lovers, not yet. Perhaps never in the traditional sense. Two species with different physiologies, different lives, different histories. But they were something more powerful than romance, partners, equals. Two people who had chosen each other against every expectation the universe had set. Aric broke the silence with a small smile. You know, he said, once upon a time you ordered me to remove my helmet. She laughed softly. You refused. You threatened my life. You challenged my empire. He turned toward her fully. Do you want to know what I saw when I took it off? Vaelira lifted her chin, amused. I assume you're about to make this dramatic. No, he said, honest. She waited. I saw someone who wasn't afraid of me, he said quietly. Someone who was afraid of herself, and I thought, if she ever lets herself breathe, she'll change the fate of entire systems. Her breath trembled. And you did, Aric finished. Today proved it. She looked up at him, not as an empress, not as a conqueror, but as a person who had finally allowed herself to be seen. And you, she said softly, were the first person in my life who looked at me and didn't see a throne.